Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about the wellness industry or personal growth industry's favorite topic, and that is self love. You guessed it. And self love is something that we always hear. You have to learn how to love yourself before you can love another. And I don't actually truly agree with that sentiment. I agree that we can learn to love ourselves through a reflection in a mirror of another if we are aware enough and courageous enough to do that work. That's an entirely other video. But in today's video, I want to talk about how we can actually learn to love ourselves, because I think there's so much going around about learning to love ourselves and employing that love, but we don't actually know how to give and receive love because we were never actually really taught how to truly do that, maybe growing up or in past partnerships where we didn't have that awareness level. So stay with me. I'm going to talk about my 3 ways for learning how to truly, truly love yourself. So I want to just give you a little bit of background and personal story on myself and how I finally arrived at self-love and started doing this work. And I always like to do this with my videos. This is kind of starting to be a bit of a theme I'm noticing. And I think it just comes from my kind of blogging and traditional writing background, where I always think it's so powerful to hear from each other's stories and share our stories so we can learn and, feel what the other person felt and see it in ourselves and then employ that in our own lives. So that being said, I grew up in a family where, and it wasn't right or wrong, it's just the way it is. I always think that we are given our family situations because we are here to learn something from that circumstance and from those people and from those events. But in my family, we didn't really show a lot of love and affection. There wasn't really any I love you said. We didn't do really much, physical intimacy or touch or hugs or anything like that. And we didn't always speak kindly to each other, especially when I was a teenager. I'm sure you guys can relate to this. But we just didn't really relate to each other in that way. So I know that translated to the rest of my relationships, my partnerships, because that always mirrors your relationship with your family from the beginning and, into my adult life. And I was a bit prone to attracting unhealthy partnerships or kind of dancing in that, especially early on. And then as a result, I kind of formulated this belief system that partnerships were contractive and they didn't feel freeing and expansive the way that I wanted to feel. And so I kind of would just dance on the perimeter of relationships and really stayed out of them deeply for the most part because of that untrue or false belief that I had created. And, since working through that belief, I have really changed my lens and my perception of relationships. And I do believe very strongly, and I work with my clients in this as well, that relationships can be, if not the most freeing thing that you can engage in. A relationship, of course, with a partner and another, and the relationship with yourself will ultimately be the most freeing piece in your entire life trajectory. But I kind of kept, back to the self-love, little side story there, back to the self-love, I kind of kept looking outside of myself for that validation or to what my partner needed to fix instead of looking internally at myself. And it wasn't until I gave myself really the space and time to do that, instead of hopping from, dating to kind of being in a relationship and then back to like dating again and just really keeping myself stimulated and distracted, I really took the time to just eliminate all of that, look inward and introspect and shift that conversation from an external one to an internal one. And that's when I really had the epiphany and the awareness that I was not able to truly love myself. I didn't have the tools or the awareness. And so I was always kind of bringing in or attracting somebody else that was mirroring that as well. And that always goes back to your subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind wants you to heal and learn that lesson. Just like I said, the way that you have been given this family or these circumstances or whatever it is, your subconscious mind is going to say, okay, that is a lesson that she is here to learn or he is here to learn. So what can we do to replicate a situation where they have the opportunity to make that shift and learn that lesson? And my problem is I just continually kept not learning the lesson, whether from fear or distraction or just not having the awareness. And for me, I think it really took finding the space to let that lesson come in and really just digest and get a higher perspective and look back on the patterns, which is a lot of what I do with my clients too, like the patterns over time that you are employing in relationships or in life or in career or whatever. Finally seeing those patterns from a higher perspective allowed me to realize, wow, this is where the shift needs to happen. I need to come back to this relationship with myself and change this dynamic. Okay, so my first and number one recommendation for really learning how to truly love yourself is to discover your highest values. And this is something that I always do in the first session when I start to work with somebody, or even when I meet somebody new. I always want to know what your core values are, what matters most to you, because this is so important for relating with each other, connecting with each other, and just understanding each other and understanding yourself. So many of us kind of think our highest values are things like, I often hear, like, I want a family or travel or entrepreneurship, or just having like a big social circle or whatever that is. And those are values. Yes, those are important to you. Those are your interests. Those are a way that you want to experience life, but they are a level above your core values. So your core values are what's driving those experiences and the way that you want to experience life. So we want to get down layers below and really figure out what is most meaningful to you so you can realize why and how you want to experience those values up here, and then match those up with how you are living your life and ultimately loving yourself. Because if you're not leading by your true core values and you're leading by the values of others, which often happens in many of our lives and many of our relationships, then you're not going to be able to truly love yourself, because you're not being yourself in the highest, fullest expression, right? So if we have a parent or a partner that really values ambition and drive, and so we try to be really ambitious and driven, but our nature is to be much more, relaxed and creative and just kind of let things come to us and let things happen, then you're always going to be in conflict ultimately with yourself and not able to truly love yourself at the highest level. Okay, so to really get down to the core of your core values, the core of your core, I always do I like to call it values elicitation, and I'll give a whole session to this sometimes if it's really needed to just really get down into those deep layers. But let's just do an example, a figurative kind of example, and see if you can have some kind of, moments in reflection and see what you're coming up with there. So let's say that you have a goal to travel the world, right? And so why is that important to you? Why do you want that? What is that? How is that going to make you feel? And so you might say, oh, for adventure and curiosity, or to challenge myself, or just to have fun, right? Okay, so then why is that important to you? Why do you want to feel and experience those things? And you might say, oh, because I want to feel free, or I want to feel happy and joyful, or I want to feel connected to the greater world at large. Okay, so then why are those things important to you? And we just keep drilling down, and you can do this to yourself even in a journaling session, and just keep getting down in those layers. And ultimately, you might arrive at, oh, I just want to really feel loved, or feel at peace, or feel, a greater sense of connection and belonging, right? And so those are like the deepest layer. And I feel like we usually like to stay a little bit above. So I would say in this quick elicitation, your values would be freedom and joy and maybe curiosity. And that is where we would kind of say, okay, that's where you want to lead and live your life by. So now, how can you be more of those values? How can you put those values into your life at a higher level in your interactions with others, in your career path, in your free time? And the more that you are being and living by those values, the more confidence, trust, and capability you are going to develop within yourself, and the more your self-love is going to flourish and grow. So another way of doing this and really getting down to your core values, if you're struggling a bit with that exercise and those kind of questioning prompts, is I would recommend to many people, especially if I'm working with somebody who wants to be in a partnership, to make a list of what you really want and value in a partnership. And a lot of us don't take the time and energy to actually do this and be really intentional about it. And it can be a very powerful exercise. So taking the time to really get down, what do you value? What do you want in a partner? And having that list just kind of concrete in front of you. And then I usually would have the person come to the session with that list, right? And we would work through it together, and they would read it back to me. And maybe it's, you want somebody that's kind and compassionate and spiritual and ambitious and, you know, whatever. There's a whole list, and there's all sorts of things that we value and want in a partner. And then after you're done reading it or going through that list, then I basically would ask you to turn that list around and take a look at it, because that is what you truly value and who you truly are. You are those things already, and that is how you want to be showing up in the world and in your life. So by being those values and becoming that before you attract that into your life is what's going to attract that partner into your life. So again, if you want somebody that's creative and kind and ambitious and all of these things, if you are being that, like attracts like, right? That person that is out there employing those values and living and being by that is going to be a good match with you who is employing and being by that, instead of thinking you have a void in those values, or you're not living them at the highest level. And so you're seeking it outside of you to kind of take the pressure off almost, or not have to truly hold and embody them yourself. And so it's kind of a workaround, and it can work. You can get into a relationship with somebody that has those things and then kind of use that as a marker or something to aspire to, but it is much easier and I think much more powerful to live by those values first and employ that self-love in that relationship with who you truly are, and then that partner will come in as a perfect match. To give another personal example of this one, I always wanted a partner who, again, going back to the beginning, made me feel really expansive and supported and free and creative. And I remember even being in therapy sessions and being like, I don't want anybody that makes me feel contractive anymore. I just want to feel expansive, and I want complete presence, and I value quality time, and just kind of listing off all these things. And then realizing that I was not being that in my own life. I was not being my biggest cheerleader and supporter of my business and those creations. I was not doing things that made me feel expansive and free, like taking spontaneous trips or being in nature or dancing or doing art on, evening nights or weekends. I wasn't actually employing those things. And then even going back to quality time, I really, really value that with another. And when I would finally have some quality time for myself, or maybe even not make that time, but kind of find it or stumble on it, I would always fill it with something else. And that might be even calling a friend or doing the next thing that came up, or answering text messages and scrolling on Instagram, whatever it was. I wasn't giving myself that quality time and presence. And so learning to do those things first before I ask for it from another just taught me how I want to be loved and allowed me to love myself. And then, of course, with a partner, they can see that as well and know that about you and kind of support and mirror that as well. My second tip for truly learning how to love yourself is to learn and speak your love language. And so this is something that I know a lot of you have heard of, the 5 love languages. And they are quality time, physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, and acts of service. Nailed it the first time. But these love languages are often said in the context of learning to love another through this love language and understand their language, and then vice versa, understanding how you like to give and receive love, which is extremely, extremely important. But I often think that we don't take the time to love ourselves in the language and the way that we want to speak and love to ourselves. So if you understand that you really value quality time, that's my love language, so I guess I'll pick that one since it's the easiest. But if you really value quality time and you are not giving yourself quality time and space to be yourself and do things that really fill you up, and you're maybe always filling it with time spent on others or distractions or TV, Netflix, Instagram, whatever else it is, then you are not truly loving yourself in the way that you want to be loved. And this can go the same for, let's say your love language is physical touch. So maybe you can add in a yoga class more often, or getting a massage, or taking a hot bath, anything that really kind of activates that physical touch and that feeling of love for yourself. And that is a way to exemplify and grow your self-love. And let's see if I can do a few more. Gifts. That one's easy, right? Treat yourself. So if you have a love language of gifts, then maybe going out and buying something that really feels nourishing and uplifting to you is a way of showing yourself some love when you really need it. Or acts of service, you could go and volunteer, because maybe that's also living by your highest values. Or do something for yourself, like taking care of your home and really just making it a beautiful space and a beautiful place, and taking the time to really do that. So just learning your love language and then giving yourself love in that language and in that way and that methodology. So I saw a quote a while back that it resonated with me really deeply, because it was like, be with somebody who understands your language, so you don't have to, I'm messing up. Be with somebody who understands your language, so you don't have to spend a lifetime translating your soul. And I just felt like that really resonated with me, because we want people to understand and speak our language, but we also want to speak and understand our own language. And it sounds funny, like we wouldn't know that, but I think really just making that concrete and tangible allows us to give ourselves love in that way. My last tip for truly loving yourself is making commitments and keeping promises to yourself. So despite your love language, I know everybody's love language is giving yourself the time, energy, and attention that you truly deserve. And we do that by making commitments to ourselves and keeping those commitments and promises and building trust, because your self-love and your relationship with yourself is built like any other relationship in your life. It is built on a foundation of trust. And so you can start really small in building that trust. And this is something that I really had to work on for a very long time. I had a lot of commitment issues outside of myself, but also within myself. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And for me, building trust looked like little things, like just taking 5 minutes in the morning to journal every day and making that commitment to myself and following through with it, and then building that trust that, okay, I've got myself. If I say I'm going to do this, I'm going to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, and then I'm going to take those 5 to 10 minutes and journal and just give myself that space and get those feelings out on paper. And it could be that you want to take a walk at lunchtime and you're committed to that and you want to keep that promise to yourself. So maybe you start small with, again, like a couple of minutes a day or a few times around the block. right? And then you build that trust, just like any trust in a relationship is built, small steps at a time. And then next thing you know, you do 6 blocks, and then you go walk down to your local track down the street at the high school or something, and you start doing a few more laps, and then you're jogging, and now you're training for a half marathon. So that is how it is built, those small sustainable commitments and promises, one after another. And doing that strengthens your self-love and capacity to build that trust in yourself, and exponentially grows you as a person and your confidence and your identity and all those pieces over time. In conclusion, get to know yourself, discover your core values, learn and speak your love language, and show up for yourself continually, making those commitments and keeping those promises and building that trust in yourself. Self-love, I'll say it again, is like any other relationship in our lives. It is built and strengthened over time. So give yourself that time, energy, and attention to nurture and invest in yourself, because you deserve it.